Without the Pentagon, there wouldn't be Wall Street, so we've got to be against both, and we've got to fight against both. My name's Ian, I'm with the Answer Coalition. We've got a lot of different groups and individuals who are on their way, who are here, who are coming tonight, and we appreciate all of that. We know that it's tough on a Friday night, but the dedicated people can start a revolution, and we're those dedicated people. We've been out in the streets for many years, and we'll be out in the streets until we win, because we know that's going to happen. So tonight, we'll stay out here for a while. We'll get our brothers and sisters to come out too. We'll do some chanting. We'll have some speakers from different organizations. Some anti-war veterans come here tonight too. And so with that, let's do some chanting. Money for jobs and education.
Money for jobs and education.
Not for war and occupation.
Not for war and occupation.
Money for jobs and education.
Money for jobs and education.
Not for war and occupation.
Not for war and occupation.
Money for jobs and education.
Money for jobs and education.
Not for war and occupation.
Not for war and occupation.
We need money for jobs and education.
Money for jobs and education.
Not for war and occupation.
Not for war and occupation.
I said not for war and occupation.
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 All right, let's keep it up. And you know, there are many people out on the streets that can see our signs. The traffic is very bad in Los Angeles, so they have to see our signs, and they'll be forced to see our signs. We want to get people to honk if they can. Honk for peace, honk for justice, honk for an end to the war. But we're not just for peace in the abstract. We've got to have an end to the war against the people of Afghanistan, an end to the occupation of Iraq, and end to the bombing of Pakistan, which is happening on an almost daily basis. That's $3 billion going to fund the war machine and intelligence gathering every single day. And that's $3 billion that is coming directly out of our communities, that is coming directly out of the need for jobs, for health care, for education, for all the things that we need, all the social programs that are on the chopping block. That could end. In California, the budget, the entire budget, could go, the deficit could go away within less than a month if the war stopped tomorrow. And we know that that's the same for all the different states that are facing budget deficits, and that's almost every state in the United States. The occupation's got to go!
The occupation's got to go!
Hey Obama, we say no!
Hey Obama, we say no!
The occupation's got to go!
The occupation's got to go!
Hey Obama, we say no!
Hey Obama, we say no!
The occupation's got to go!
The occupation's got to go!
Hey Obama, we say no!
Hey Obama, we say no!
The occupation's got to go!
The occupation's got to go!
Hey Obama, we say no!
Hey Obama, we say no!
The occupation's got to go!
The occupation's got to go!
What do we want? Troops out! When do we want it?
Now!
What do we want?
Troops out!
When do we want it?
Now!
What do we want?
Troops out!
When do we want it?
Now!
What do we want?
Troops out!
When do we want it?
Now!
What do we want?
Troops out!
When do we want it?
Now!
Say, what do we want?
Troops out!
When do we want it?
Now!
Say, what do we want?
Troops out!
When do we want it?
Now!
What do we want?
Troops out!
When do we want it?
Now!
Say, when do we want it?
Now!
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 What do we want?
Troops out!
When do we want it?
Now!
What do we want?
Troops out!
When do we want it?
Now!
What do we want?
Troops out!
When do we
You
want
know, it took us 10 years to end that war in Vietnam. And there were ups and downs throughout that 10-year period. There were times when there was almost nobody in the street. Then there were times when there were tens of thousands of people in the street. There were times when nobody was getting arrested. There were times when it seemed like everybody was getting arrested. But you know what happened? The same thing that we see happening now with the war in Afghanistan and Iraq. Because the war in Vietnam ended for two very clear reasons. One, because of the battlefield victories by the Vietnamese liberation forces. The same kind of victories, the same kind of fight for sovereignty, the same kind of fight to get a foreign power off of their land that the Iraqis are waging, that the Afghanistanis are waging, and the Pakistanis are waging. And you can't forever beat somebody on their home turf. You can't forever keep waging war in somebody else's country because they will fight to the last man and woman standing. And that's not true for our country because we're not defending ourselves. We've invaded somebody else. So that's number one reason why this war will end. But number two, remember the war in Vietnam ended under two Republican presidents, Nixon and Ford, right? Now they were hardly even at peace. But it ended under those two characters. Why? Because of those victories on the battlefield, but also, essentially, because we had finally, after years and years of little demonstrations, big demonstrations, public debates, what have you, built such a powerful, massive, broad, undeniable movement that it didn't matter whether it was a Democratic Congress or a Democratic President or a Republican. It finally became impossible, I should say, for the war makers to hold the corporate America to continue the Vietnam War. So all I'm saying is, friends, don't be discouraged. There's a whole new movement in the country today. The economic crisis has made people more aware of those $3 trillion we've spent on these wars. As they're losing their jobs and losing their homes, they're taking another look. That's why all these young folks are bravely out in the streets, taking on Wall Street and the rich. And therefore, the most important thing for us to remember tonight is that it isn't so important who's sitting in the White House or who's sitting in the Congress, but it is sure as hell important who is sitting in the streets of America and marching on the streets of America. And as long as we keep sitting in the streets of America and marching in the streets of America, those buggers in Washington will finally run out of money, run out of will, run out of lies, run out of excuses. The hell with hope and change. Don't believe the politicians. They'll only do what you and I make them do. That's the history of this country, and we can do it.
I recognize a lot of you from the Occupy LA demonstrations. If you've been at Occupy LA this week, make some noise. All right, we're here because we connect the dots. We know that while they're telling us there's no money for jobs, there's no money for school, there's no money for housing, healthcare, the things people need, that money is being poured into the criminal wars in Afghanistan and in Iraq. Like Dr. King said, the bombs being dropped in Afghanistan have been exploding in our neighborhoods here at home, and we're ready for it to stop. So we're going to do some chants. This is another repeat after me. We want money for jobs and education.
Money for jobs and education.
Not for war and occupation.
Not for war and occupation.
Money for jobs and education.
Money for jobs and education.
Not for war and occupation.
Not for war and occupation.
Money for jobs and education.
Money for jobs and education.
Not for war and occupation.
Not for war and occupation.
Money for jobs and education.
Money for jobs and education.
Not for war and occupation.
Not for war and occupation.
All right, we're going to keep it going with another speaker. I'm happy to welcome Kevin Baker from March Forward. Kevin is an Iraq War veteran who's here to speak out against the war. Please welcome Kevin.
Hi, how's everybody doing? Good? Outstanding. So my name's Kevin Baker. I was in the Army for 8 years, and I went to Iraq in 2005, 2006, 2007, 2008. And we're gathered here today to mark the 10th anniversary of the criminal invasion and occupation against the people of Afghanistan. And so let's take a minute and reflect on what this 10 years has brought the people of Afghanistan, the U.S. service members, and our friends and families here in the United States. In Afghanistan during these past 10 years, you've had tens of thousands of people that have lost their lives, hundreds of thousands of people that have lost their lives. On top of that, you have millions of human beings who have lost their limbs, their eyesight, and face psychological trauma for the rest of their lives. What's happened in the United States? We have no jobs, we have no education, our education is declining, and we still don't have a single-payer healthcare system? How is it possible in the wealthiest country in the history of humanity, we're incapable of providing education and jobs for our own people? On top of that, you have 1,700 service members who have lost their lives in Afghanistan. You have 40,000 service members who have lost their limbs, who have lost their eyesight, and are charged with PTSD and traumatic brain injury. So, we should ask ourselves, what's going on with these wars? Why are we fighting these wars? Why is it impossible to get a coherent explanation from the politicians that ask us to die? Well, I'll tell you why. It's because they use service members as poker chips, hoping to cash in and win a jackpot of billions of dollars for their rich friends on Wall Street. We know that over 2/3 of the American people are not in agreement with these wars. We know that 2/3 of us, the working people of the United States, completely disagree and demand an immediate withdrawal of our brothers and sisters in uniform from occupying the people of Afghanistan. Why is this not happening? How is it possible in a country that celebrates democracy and claims that it's bringing democracy throughout the entire world, it doesn't listen to its own people? It's because it's not a government for our people. It's not a government of the students. It's not a government of the workers. It's a government of the rich. For the first time in the history of the United States, you have tens of thousands of brave students, of brave workers, of brave vets, of brave service members who are realizing that it makes no sense to blame a single politician. It makes no sense to blame a single president. And we're blaming a single system, and that system that we're blaming is capitalism.
Yes. Yes. All right, sisters and brothers, I'm honored to bring up Mr. Blaise Fontaine from the Office of Americas. Please welcome Blaise Fontaine.
Congratulations to all of the occupiers of the homeland. We've been waiting for you because you're occupying a culture that is filled with death. It is called necrophilia, love of death. It has the death penalty with the murder of Troy. It has the death penalty for our servants overseas, our service people. It has a death penalty for the children of Iraq, the children of Afghanistan, the children of the Middle East are dying and have been dying for 20 years in an unnecessary, illegal, immoral war. That culture of death is also here domestically, where people die because they don't have health care, because they don't have food, because they don't have their basic rights. Now we have an outline of where we want to go, and it's in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It's all there. And what we have to do is put that into practice, that health care is a right, that education is a right. These are not things that are privileges. They are not yet in our Constitution. It's a very old Constitution, and it needs a lot of work. And we have to do that work to make these things clear that people need an income even if they are not working. People who are 2 years old need an income. People who are 3 years old need an income. People who are, do you follow me? Most of the people who are poor cannot work. Why? They're not yet 5 years old. So there are many people that are needing help of all kinds. So we insist on these rights. You're occupying the right country at the right time. Very proud of what's going on in Los Angeles, on Wall Street, and now at D.C. Tremendous turnouts there, and throughout the Midwest as well, and throughout the Northwest. So congratulations, this is the time. This is the moment we've been waiting for, and you're the people we have been waiting for. Congratulations.